Hi, Dennis Weiss. I work for Eagle Communications. Welcome to Why Like Ike. We have fishing gear all over this table. We have articles about the president and being the leading sportsman of the nation. We have David Holbrook down there. We have Shannon Gallagher right here. And we're going to communicate to you why fishing was important to America. Quite a challenge, fellas. Okay, so you have a pile of paper, Mr. Holbrook.
I do.
We have a pile of fishing gear.
I think you have the best deal.
Yeah, we do. Some cool stuff.
Some very nice equipment here.
So here's going to be my input, and then you guys are going to take over, and I'll enjoy. 8 years of peace and prosperity. That I filmed lots of shows with Eisenhower in the center frame about 8 years of peace and prosperity. And we're looking at leisure time activities here. Leisure time became way more leisurely after World War II than it was before. So I can see how Eisenhower fit in, but what's the strategic interest of projecting Eisenhower and leisure time? How can we communicate that? Challenge.
Well, Eisenhower's love for fishing started early in his life here in Abilene. When he was a young boy, they were not wealthy, but fishing was not expensive. He'd go out to a willow and cut a willow down and tie on a rope and a 5-cent hook, and then he'd walk over to Mud Creek, just 7 blocks from here, or down to the Smoky River, and he'd catch whatever he could, catfish, and bring it home, and that supplement the family dinner. It's also a way that he developed friendships. We have an oral history from L.J. Asper, and he talks about how when he was 11 years old and he looked up to Eisenhower, who was 13, 2 years older, there was a big flood, and he hadn't really hung with the older kids, but he liked to fish, and Eisenhower liked to fish, and they took advantage of the floodwaters and went out and caught a lot of big catfish that swum up from the Smoky River, and it developed a lifelong friendship.
I think we've filmed a number of programs, Why Like Ike, that talks about the commonness of Dwight David Eisenhower at the start of his life. And we're looking at the tail end of his life today, really. You told me, Shannon, that all of this gear here was the gear that Eisenhower was using in the years just before he passed away.
Most of it, yes. We have some of his gear that he was using up until the day that he died. A few of them are special presentation pieces, which we'll get into when we start talking about the artifacts. But a majority of this was his gear. It was something he had the best. Whether he bought it himself or it was a gift from a company that they wanted the president to use their stuff, he always had the best gear, and we'll get into that a little bit more later on. But yes, there's some very high quality pieces in the collection here.
Being on camera about Eisenhower a lot, it's awfully easy to be simply overcame with the general, the president, and all of the things that he accomplished in those 2 jobs. But in our filming here in Abilene, we've been presented several times with materials that remind us he's just a little boy. He grew up into a young man. He went through various schools with varying degrees of success. Then he became an Army man. Then he became a general. And then he gave the world a second chance at freedom. And then he was elected president. And after he was retired from the presidency, he still fished.
For sure.
And even after all those accomplishments, that they're still, like with the fishing and being the sportsman and just being, having that persona as sort of a regular guy. He could identify with people, and people could identify with him, but they could also look up to him, and that's a quality in a leader that you rarely find. And that was one of the biggest keys to his success. I mean, it was, when you can look at a guy and be like, and identify with him and look up to him at the same time, that's extremely key in a leadership role.
So this time frame that Mr. Eisenhower was using the fly rod near the end of his life was also at the warmest part of the Cold War. There you have a number of photographs and cartoons and advertisements, almost looking pictures that are depicting Mr. Eisenhower fishing and enjoying himself, a big smile on his face.
Yep.
How important was that to the national conversation, do you think?
Well, really, it was kind of a ploy to make everybody feel safe. We just come out of a major war. We're starting to get into the Cold War with the Soviet Union. There's, tensions with nuclear weapons, possibilities of a nuclear strike, always on people's minds. And when you see the President of the United States out having a good time, being able to get on the golf course, fishing, acting like life is normal and happy in America, it kind of helped calm the population down and get their minds off those things.
It's interesting that you say that, and I sit here and try to push myself back into the days in which you had a radio signal and you had a very few TV channels and you had newspapers. The speed of information, print, that Mr. Holbrook has a lot in front of him, and pictures, it didn't move at the speed of that mobile phone over there. So the communication in pictures was still a very big thing.
For sure. Yeah, he was right on the cutting edge of that. And I think a lot of things that Eisenhower did was on different levels. He loved to play poker, and he'd try and place several cards ahead of whoever he was playing against. And definitely he was the image that he wanted to present to the country and to other countries was very important. But the time that he spent fishing, it was also a sacred experience. One of the places that he just loved to go was Briar's Ranch in Colorado. And he said that whenever he went there, it was as if it was a church. It was a sacred place. And this is a picture of Eisenhower with his grandson, and it's a bonding experience with his,
he's in uniform in the picture, or not?
No.
I can't tell from here.
That's
that's a different. Okay, yeah. Yes, I see.
And there's we have some more pictures of. It was well publicized. There was a lot of press about it right after World War II. A lot of people were interested in Eisenhower's private life. Eisenhower took a trip to Wisconsin with his 5 brothers, a fishing trip. Okay. And there's a lot of press, and for those fishermen out there, they may be interested that this is one of the last times that he publicly fished with a worm. When he was growing up, he loved to fish with a worm. That's how he caught a lot of his fish. But he, after 1946 or so, he pretty much exclusively went with fly fishing. But on this fishing, very successful walleye and trout expedition to Wisconsin with his five brothers, they caught the fish however they could.
That's interesting. The Eisenhower family and all those boys, and we've talked about sibling rivalries. Gosh, fishing and hunting are natural lead-ins for sibling rivalries, and who caught the biggest fish. So we have a scale over here, Shannon. I don't know how many Eisenhower fish were hung on this particular scale.
This was in his tackle box, so this is one he used. And I just kind of pulled this out to show everybody that even the President of the United States was making sure that what he pulled out of the water was legal. I don't think anybody would have stopped him if it was a little bit under, but the kind of guy Eisenhower was, I'm sure he probably measured everything he pulled out.
So we have a couple of reels in front of us,
yes.
And I guess one looks kind of like a normal working reel and one does not.
We have a bait caster reel and a fly reel here.
Okay.
The bait caster reel is a fluger. This was one he wouldn't have been using every day. This was a presentation piece given to him by the Pfluger family. The Pfluger Reel Company has been around since 1881. They're an American company out of Akron, Ohio. They were the benchmark for all fishing reels.
Okay.
They have been compared, the internal workings have been compared to a Swiss watch. They were just a fantastic, fantastic fishing reel, especially for the time period they came out. And this particular model came out in 1916, and it's actually still in a very close copy of this is still in use today because it was so good, and it's very, very highly sought after by collectors.
Well, I haven't done much fishing with gold-plated reel.
I don't think Eisenhower did much either. This is tucked away in the very bottom of his special box where he kept a lot of the flies. This was kind of like his storage tackle box where he would pull things out and then put them into this bag to take with him. This other reel here is a fly reel. A little bit different with a bait caster, especially this kind, particularly, it would be for like a spinning, a spinner. You would cast out there and then roll it back real slowly and try to catch something. Fly reels, obviously a little bit different. That's, you see the guys out there, just topping the fly off the top of the water trying to catch a fish. This particular one was made by the Hardy brothers in England. I believe this was a purchase that Eisenhower made himself because there was no gift card that we could find with this. They are another one of the reel companies that is just top of the line. They've been around forever. They actually started as a gunsmith company in 1872.
Okay.
So, and then switched over about 20 years later when the gentleman brought his two brothers into the company who were really into fishing. And they used some of their gunsmithing knowledge to make the internal parts of the reel. And again, this was the benchmark for fly reels. And they're still very highly sought after today.
One of the neat things about filming here are all the things that you guys can bring out of the vaults that most people wouldn't get a chance to see. But maybe not this reel or this reel, but
this particular one is on display in the museum every day, along with his tackle box. It's in the very end of the Twilight Gallery as you're exiting the museum on the left-hand side in the lighted case.
You can come see it. The same thing we have in front of us here today.
This is on display every day along with his tackle box. And we are probably going to put one of his fly rods in that case too. We've been talking about that today, so they may even be able to get to see this one in person if they came to visit.
So what have you got in front of you, Mr. Holbrook? It looks like a political headline to me from here.
Well, going back to the scale, at the Briar Ranch, they have a St. Louis Creek, and this is a picture of him and Axel Nelson. They only caught one fish each, and it's about the size of their hand. And they were happy to catch one fish, and I happened to make it up to the St. Louis Creek last fall, and it's about the same size of fish. So they're still brook trout, and they haven't grown any over the years.
And who was in the photo with him?
Axel Nelson.
Okay.
He was the half owner of Briar's Ranch.
Okay. All right.
And it's very possible that they were using a fly called the H&L, or the House and Lot. It was a fly that was invented by a local Denver high school teacher, and he had another name for it. He called it the AP. But when Eisenhower and Axel started calling it the H&L, and the press started referring to it, that it got known as that. I think there's a couple of those H&L.
There are a few on his vest there.
So he said that was, the article's called Ike's Fly Fishing Secrets, and this fly was supposed to be very, very good there.
There we go.
And being one of his favorites would explain why there's several of them still on his last fishing vest.
Sheepskin up there. Well, the stuff is always interesting to me to look at because I think, who doesn't like stuff? But it's Dwight David Eisenhower stuff, and the insight into the man and the period of time in which he did these things. For me, it's always been an important message about when he was a leader of our country. There were a lot of things going on domestically that were great. There were a lot of things going on internationally that were still pretty rugged with Russia, especially the Soviet Union, the Cold War. Leading a nation from the middle of a trout stream in Colorado is a calming influence. That picture on the evening news or the New York Times front page would have been a calming influence on the world. And that was a time that it was needed.
For sure.
And being that was a strategy, it's Eisenhower kind of got a bad rap for a long time as being spending more time on the golf course or fishing, but in the end, it was really, you know, a political strategy to make the country feel more comfortable, and he got a lot of business done while he was out doing recreation.
The critics never change their strategy in life. The same criticisms follow every administration through. I think, you know, you're wasting too much time is the basis of it. We have the benefit of a lot of past to look back at Dwight David Eisenhower's administration and the unparalleled record of scientific achievement. The gap from where we were to where we were when he left office after 8 years, I don't think that's been replicated even with Bill Gates' time. Amazing technology explosion in a period of 8 years of peace and prosperity. Suburbia was born during the Eisenhower
infrastructure, the highways, the freeways.
All of those things, and that's why fishing tackle is relevant to a show like Why Like Ike.
Yeah.
It is.
Okay, what else have you got that we haven't talked about?
One point on the fishing reel and technological developments. Okay. Somebody asked him why he wasn't using an automatic reel. In the 60s, a reel was developed. You just pressed on it, and it was spring-loaded, and it would just reel it in.
Yep.
And Eisenhower didn't directly respond, but his friend Axel said, my only guess is that the manual reel weighed a couple ounces less, and it was more efficient. And so,
my grandfather left me one of those little push-button fly reels.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So, what else do we have?
If we have a couple more minutes. Take a couple of seconds to talk about this Payne fly rod here. That's also a top-of-the-line rod. They have been around for a very, very long time. Started in 1876 out of New York. Mm-hmm. They're still currently making rods out of Bend, Oregon. The prices on these things are amazing. Collectors love them. They last forever. They can go anywhere for a vintage one like this from $1,200 to $3,500 just for a rod, with no provenance. They're very, very highly sought after, and when this came from the Gettysburg shipment, this was the rod that he was using at the time. It still had his fly reel connected to it.
Okay.
So we have that also, and behind you here we have his little fishing outfit. It's all Abercrombie and Fitch from the 50s. We kind of back when they made sporting goods and didn't make teeny bopper clothes for college kids.
Right.
That's both the bag and the vest are both Abercrombie and Fitch. Very, very high-end sporting goods from England back in the day. They didn't make their transition into like the fashion industry until much later.
They were also one of the leading importers of fine rifles. They were also one of the groups that put sportsmen from all over the world into the safari business. They were a different company in those days.
Yes, they're a much different company, and their vintage gear is still very highly sought after as well. And when that jacket came here, it still had those flies attached to it and his hooks in the pocket. So these are on his last fishing trip, he had those flies with him, he had these hooks in his pocket. And these are just regular old eagle claw hooks but they went on the last fishing trip that Eisenhower ever went on. So that's what makes them kind of special. And we also have, I kind of wanted to talk about this too. This particular lure here is called a Lazy Ike. It was not named after the president.
All right.
The history of this starts in the 30s. There was an Austrian immigrant who started a fishing tackle company, and he came across the gentleman who was fishing up near Fort Dodge, Iowa, with handmade lures like this.
Okay.
And he watched the action coming across that lake, and he's like, "Oh, by God, that's a Lazy Ike." And that in his language, Ike has something to do with entomology in some Eastern European languages and Germanic languages. And so I assumed, that he was saying it had an action like a bug floating across the water, and they began making these. And I'm sure with the sense of humor of military men, that Eisenhower probably got quite a few lazy Ikes as presidents, and we have quite a few in the collection. Okay. But this is one of the early ones. I believe this is one of the ones that was originally handmade by the gentleman at Fort Dodge, Iowa. Because it has all the right markings. He handmade them for 3 years, and they still make these things.
So we looked at this before the camera came on. So it's a tiny fishing license.
That is it. Fishing license from Maryland.
The interesting thing it says is?
Yes, it is presented to His Excellency Dwight David Eisenhower. Compliments of the Maryland Fishing License Bureau in 1955.
We don't call our presidents Excellency anymore, but I'm not selling a fishing license either. Maybe I would.
I think there was a period of time in the 1800s when that was an appropriate term to call the president, but that's kind of more for foreign dignitaries these days.
Okay, gentlemen, we have about 1 minute left. So, first of all, thanks for bringing out the entertaining himself side of Dwight David Eisenhower. Who used this opportunity to show the world that things were okay, and he could fish, they could fish. So great display. Thanks for letting people know they can see things like that out in the library. So we got about 30 seconds. Any significant point from Mr. Holbrook? I see stuff in front of you.
Just on that line, getting ready to, talking to the troops on D-Day, Ike is talking to some Rangers, and he's not talking about storming the beaches, but you can see he's talking about fly fishing. And
to Lieutenant Wallace Strobel.
Yep.
The most famous, that's one of the best photographs of Eisenhower ever. I have made this point on this program before, that I accept that he's talking about fishing. But what better to be talking about to men who already knew what their job was that day.
Yeah.
Those Rangers knew what they were going to do.
Oh, yeah.
So a good leader always tries to put a calming influence.
What are you fighting for?
What we're doing here. So grateful that we could do this today. It was a lot of fun. I'll bet there's a lot of people who are very interested to see what the museum can offer them next time they come. 2018 is going to be a huge year here at the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum, a renovation that's going to do great things for us. Please be watching for more Why Like Ike. We love bringing them to you. I work for Eagle Communications. My name is Dennis Weiss. You have a great day.